2000 Dodge Dakota 4x4 extra cab. It's an SLT. It's got a V8 Magnum. It's got 158,000 miles, and it's blowing antifreeze out of the upper radiator hose onto the battery. So I'll show you that. Up here with your radiator cap, you've got this hose, and the cap, it's integrated in it. It's got a housing. This is my replacement one. So you got hose, and then you got this plastic piece that holds the cap, and then they've got these hose clamps from the factory. And eventually this either rots or gets cracked. I think one thing you want to watch out for if you got one of these, whenever you take the radiator cap off, try to actually hold on to this so that you're not torquing this part, because that might make it break. Now, when I first started noticing the leak, I just noticed my battery was getting wet and I couldn't actually see it spraying out. I'll start it up, and at idle, at least yesterday, you couldn't see anything coming out, but when I rev it up a little bit, you can see it spew out. I don't see it spewing out today. Maybe it's because enough of it is leaked out. As far as repairs go, this should actually be pretty simple, which is why I'm doing it, because I'm not a professional mechanic. So I just need to drain a little bit of antifreeze off to make sure I don't dump a bunch out. So I'll set a bucket down there. I've got one clamp here and another one here, and then there's a hose here coming off the radiator cap. So I have to remove those. And I got a feeling I don't want this one here to go all the way and flop down, because it might drain out even more than I need to, because I'm not planning on draining everything. And while I'm thinking about it, since my upper hose went bad, maybe it's just because of the connection, I'm concerned about my lower one. It's not leaking, but I don't really know anything about the history of the truck. I don't know how old the hose is, so I'll have to get that checked out too sometime along the line here. Okay, I took off the radiator cap, and there's still some antifreeze in the hose, so I'm going to have to try to drain that back a little. It's mostly down at the bottom. I think that's why it didn't spew up. Safety goggles, just in case. Don't want to end up with antifreeze in your eyes. Okay, well, I kind of tore that a little, but we'll deal with that. If I was smart, I probably would have disconnected my negative cable too on the battery. As you can see, it tore off just getting that. And I didn't lose very much antifreeze because it had already leaked out anyway. Yummy. Okay. I just kind of clamped down on the hose itself and gave it some twisting, trying not to torque on any of the housing. And it should wiggle off of here in a second. What you had was two-piece housing that apparently rotted, and then the hard plastic broke too when I torqued this out of there. It's got two clamps, they're spring-loaded, and it's got a spring inside, which apparently is just a, I'm not sure what it does, but I don't think the new one has the one in there. Yeah, the new one doesn't have one, so I want to reuse that, I guess. And I think I'm going to try to wipe off both connectors. Then I've also seen on a video, when you go put the new one on, it helps if you spray a little silicone on here so that you can help it slide on a little easier. Okay, so here's my new part, and you want to make sure, I want the short end over towards here, and one way that's easy to remember is you've got this connector here for your reservoir hose, so it has to point that way. And also I'm going to try holding on to it kind of like this when I put it on to make sure I don't torque that connection. And it came with a radiator cap, which I'm going to remove while I'm doing this so that it can kind of burp the air out a little bit. So I'm going to put the hose clamps on it and the spring inside before I put the new one on, or else you have to do it all over. So I got my clamps, put my spring inside here. Okay, the guy that I saw do this on YouTube had to trim a little off the long end of the hose, and he was right. I had to work at it, but I got it on there and it had a hell of a kink in this end. I think he lost about a good inch. I'm afraid to cut too much off. That's a lot. Okay, I slid on this end first by the radiator, and I'm going to do the part at the engine next. That is much better. I took a little off each end, maybe not the best idea, but it seemed like the end, this end here that goes towards the engine was shorter on the old one than the new one, so I tried to make it about the same length. And then I still had to take some off of the long end. I was actually able to get it on there without removing any, but it had a huge kink over here where it curves around to go to the radiator end, to the overflow. All I did was move the battery over, by the way. This battery, I was able to do that, so I didn't actually remove it 100%. Put that back on, and that's got a little, when I tore it off of there, I messed it up. And luckily it's still enough to fit to the overflow. It probably wouldn't hurt to get a hose clamp and put it on there, except, well, maybe. I'll see if there's room with the cap. Now I got to put my clamps back in position, which why wasn't I smart enough to have this one here facing the top? Yeah, boy. I guess I have to pull it back off. So when you do it, make sure you have, if you have these kind of clamps, have these spring here up both on the top, because I wasn't going to be able to get my hand down under there and get a pair of pliers on it. So now I've got these centered up at the top with the radiator cap so I can get the pliers on them. Just have to go through this bear again, which is kind of scary because I don't want to tear this thing up. As you can see, I'm not wearing gloves. I haven't cut myself, but you could cut yourself on these clamps. Probably should have wore gloves. And then of course you need to make sure the hose clamps on the right amount, because the piece coming out of here has a little flange on it that's larger. So I got that up there. Try to center it kind of. And I'm also going to just cover this battery up so I don't accidentally arc it, even though I have rubber handles. That would hurt. I think that's about right. I ended up switching to a smaller pair of pliers to do this one over here because it was just so tight. It's hard to get in there. I've got this sort of rotated correctly. I adjusted that to try to get this up pretty level. And now I've got my little overflow hose here. Okay. Well, I loosened this up a little so I could rotate the cap up towards the top. I hooked up my overflow hose. I got this other clamp on. All I gotta do is put antifreeze in and try to bleed it out. I'm using a premix antifreeze. It says it's good for all engines and radiators. I'm gonna let it idle a little bit. I've got the heater, the thermostat all the way on high to open up the thermostat. Try to get it flowing. Actually, when I started filling it up, I was pouring into here in the reservoir, and I noticed it got up to where it was actually above the full level on the dipstick, so I topped it off with this one instead. And I decided to turn it off because I saw the level in the radiator cap one starting to come up. It hadn't actually overflowed, so I put the cap on it. Well, it seems to have worked good. I had the reservoir, I think I had too much in it, so I took an old repurposed turkey baster thing that will never get used for food again and siphoned out quite a bit. And then I started it up and let it idle for quite a while, and when it started to, after like 5 or 10 minutes, it started to warm up a little, so I took it out for a ride and went down the highway about 4 or 5 miles and came back, got it up to highway speed, and everything seems okay. And as you can see, the driveway is nice and wet. I tried to rinse that off real good with the hose. I don't want the neighbors' dogs come over here and drink that stuff. So I'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully it'll be good. Let's see, as far as pieces of advice, I'd say before you start putting the new one on, I would compare the length of it to the old one, because, you know, it just depends on your setup. I had to take 1/2 inch to 1 inch off each end. I would compare it, you know, and of course think twice before you cut. But it was definitely too long. It was going to kink up real bad. So that seemed to be the right idea for this setup. My guess is that that piece fits multiple vehicles, and some of them may need the full length.